Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Space General's Creepypasta Read and Review. See, this is a show where I'm going to read and review, creepypastas, as the name suggests. I was kind of thinking that creepypastas are a cool, flash, audience-created story form, and unfortunately there's not enough criticism within the community, and, Sturgeon's Law is in effect for a lot of creepypastas. Many of them aren't very good. 90% of them are crap. And I think it'd be good to have a little bit of criticism within the community. We have enough people that will read over them. We have people that riff on them. We don't have enough people that will read them and talk about what makes them bad and then how they could be made better, I think. We need that within the community. And so I will fill that role as the dashing, charming knight that I am. I will fill that role. I will read a story and I'll make some jokes about it, bash it a little bit, and then talk about what can make it better. So the first story that I'm going to do is, as the title suggests, the story Skinwalker. And I'm reading this from the esteemed website called the Creepypasta Wiki. Without further ado, let us get into the action. My father told me a story once. I'll never forget it, for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died. But honestly, that isn't the reason. You just said a couple seconds ago that he told you that you remember it for a few reasons. So assumedly you remember it for at least two reasons. But one of those reasons isn't that your grandfather died? I feel like at least one of them should be that you remember it because it's a story of how your grandfather died. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes over here, but spelled over and then here, like not one word as over here should be. You overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts and aliens, and you think to yourself, that isn't real, they're making it up, or they are mistaken, or they are crazy, or something like that. You just can't believe it until something happens. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you. Maybe you hear the same story again and again, happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. But if I heard a bunch of people tell the same story, I think that they're all making it up and they're using a stock story. As I said, this is a story my father told me, yes, but I never believed it. Even though he swore up and down it was true. He said, damn it, this is true. He said, shit, this is true. Wrong kind of swearing up and down. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet that I started to believe. I started to hear other stories just like the one my father told me. It didn't take long for me to believe in the rake. That's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life. How? Presumably he lives in the internet age. The person writing this story can't be... I'm gonna guess from the way he tells the story that it's 20 as we go on, that he's probably in his 20s. So his father must have used the internet at least some point. He wouldn't know what the consensus had taken to naming it. When he chose to call it something other than it, or that thing, this sentence is terrible. So it goes from that thing, then closed quotation mark, period, then he called it Skinwalker after an old Navajo tale his grandfather told him. Terrible sentence, and it's also a terrible content in the sentence, because we'll talk about why Skinwalker is stupid later on. But I'll tell you the story the way he told it to me. Okay, first off, we run into the first big problem with the story, is that the author discusses that his father encountered something that he called the Skinwalker that was, as the creepypasta community calls it, the rake. That's never really a good way to start your creepypasta story, by referencing creepypasta, unless, of course, you're going to do something incredibly meta and kind of mind-screwy, which this story, having read it before, it really doesn't do. So that's the first big issue here. The other, of course, as we go on, I'll discuss why Skinwalker isn't a good thing that he calls it, as well. Okay, but I'll tell you the story the way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night, he'd tell me. Coyotes, we'd kill them for $50 a skin. They lived on a dairy farm in Ohio. Wait, whoa. Ohio is notably not within the range that the Navajos ever would have lived in. The Navajo were primarily a southwestern tribe. So it would be kind of random that his father would choose to call the rake the Skinwalker. since the Skinwalker legend wouldn't be prevalent in that area due to the fact that it's not occupied by the Navajo. They'd kill calves sometimes. We'd do it every night because we needed the money. Sometimes while we were out, we'd come on a deer and kill it just because. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. That's what it says verbatim. Anyway, we were done making our rounds and heading home, walking because we didn't have a car or some four-wheeler back then. This was before cars were invented, presumably. We cut through the woods. That's when we came upon it. Oh no, it was a clown. Blood everywhere, splattering on the trees, in the grass, in the creek, everywhere. It was in the sky. It was everywhere. Thank you for telling us what everywhere means. At first, we figured it was a pack of coyotes. Oh no, the coyotes turned into blood. We'd seen it sometimes. They can't scavenge and start hunting deer or cattle. The worst was when they bred with feral dogs. But this wasn't like that. I don't think that would be coyotes. This isn't really a direct problem with the creepypasta, but a problem with a lot of media in general. Predators don't generally leave that much blood and gore behind after they hunt. They're much tidier in their attacks. See, when a pack of dogs, or wolves, or coyotes attack something, they do it right. See, like I said, they do it right. They don't leave that much blood and gore behind. They'll pick off one that's weak, or sick, or old, or just small. They'll hunt it, draw it into a corner, someplace it can't get out of, and they'll run it right to the biggest one, the alpha. And that deer will never see that alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It'll just notice that its throat is gone, and then it'll drop dead. It's quick, it's clean. Again, it's not clean here. Okay, that wasn't what happened here. Okay, he did address that isn't what happened. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den, wolves neither, because they get too much of a fight. So I take it back about that complaint. They really did clarify that isn't what happened, and I like that. There were three bodies, just torn apart. You'd see a head here, a leg here, a torso there. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What it done this hadn't done it for food. It had done it for fun. Oh God, it's a velociraptor. But we didn't know that. We saw a bunch of carcasses, and we think it's something we gotta take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs. Okay. It's kind of interesting that they go off on that tangent there, because I do think that really does clear up something that looks wrong within the story. But I do like that they go in to explain how that is something that's, like, out of place there, and that whole violent scene is how that's unique within the wilderness. So, I'll give him points for that. That was good. That was very good. But I wasn't leaving him, and I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone, with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. He was only 13 at the time, so a .22 rifle was about the only gun he could reliably use. Dad had the shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but finally we began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard either. We just followed the blood. Either that thing bled a deer before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I know that I'd never seen my dad scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods in my life. I've been all over the world, and ain't never heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. You've never heard things screaming before. Heard deer and fox. Heard deer and fox and rabbits. I think the plural of fox is foxes. And raccoons and birds, just scared. It's like in that song by Monsters and Men. They were all scared down in their holes. And that's how the story goes. The story of those beasts. With the 4 dirty paws. Ba ba ba. Ba ba ba. What? That's a Skyrim thing, never mind. Keep in mind, this is maybe 12 or 1 o'clock. Except the fox and some birds. Nothing was supposed to even be awake. In italics. But they weren't just awake, in italics again. And then capital they with no punctuation. They were moving. I saw flocks of birds that night fly straight into trees, just trying to get out of there. So do they fly, like, into the tree line, or do they literally fly into trees? Because that's kind of both an unsettling thought and a really funny thing. Like, the birds just thunk right into the trees. We came up on a pack of coyotes, nearly shot a couple thinking it was what we were looking for. Us, but then we saw they were running towards us. They ran right past us, didn't even notice. Then some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, even a couple of wild hogs. These things were supposed to be, and italics again, eating each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting out of there. Oh God, this voice is getting annoying. I'm gonna stop doing it. We should have put it together that maybe whatever we were tracking, it wasn't something we were supposed to see, and it wasn't something we could kill. Yeah, how would you put that together? You're walking through the woods and some animals are acting weird. You wouldn't think that the animal you're hunting is like a magical creature. You'd think, hey, maybe there's going to be a storm. Animals act a little weird before storms. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, to fight. A little bit of a cliche there. We kept going because we were curious. But again, I think that's a good cliche that you have in creepypastas. That's a good explanation for why you keep doing something weird, because you're curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, to fight. And knowing what I knew about what my dad did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally get into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks then. A lot of the animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land. What? Like they pulled out cement mixers and started dumping cement? They're like, oh shit, gotta get out of this forest! Quickly lay on the road behind us! Everyone knows that weird monster animals, they just can't go on a road. It's their natural weakness. It's like the headless horseman in water, monster animals in roads. Oh, it just doesn't mix. But where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single, damn it, italicized step. These italics are so baffling. Like they were leaving it for us to find. Nothing had messed with the deer blood. Like they were leaving it for them to find. What are the animals supposed to do with the deer blood? Get some comment on that thing and wax it right out? The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, but that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds wet nearly tore out my damn throat once. All that means is that it's quick and hard to hit, and it somehow ripped apart huge deer. If you hit a deer, it makes a dent in your car. I don't think something 100 pounds is going to take out deer. So we follow the tracks, and it doesn't take us long to find where it is. There's this old schoolhouse that sits on the top of the hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there, not for a long time. Nobody lived in the schoolhouse. Yes, it's a schoolhouse. People don't live there. We caught homeless people in there sometimes, or druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding a high, but we didn't think that for long. Stoner. Someone smokes some weed and kills a deer. That's a silly thought. We get within 50 yards and we hear this noise, a screeching kind of sound. It was sort of made up of two different sounds. One was a high-pitched screech, another was a low-pitched growl. It was a screech. It was a screech and something else, actually, but it was a screech. It was making both at the same time. That's my impression. I hope you like it. We get within 20 yards and we hear this sound. Yes. Oh, no. Yeah, we hear that sound. And then I can remember thinking that it sounded like paper being torn apart while someone was swinging water in a bucket back and forth. Dad looks at me, kneels down and whispers, I gotta stay behind him because we're about to corner him. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially when it's a predator. But we can tell by the tracks that it's just one. He tells me it's probably a single feral dog, probably rabid. The plan is to sneak up on it while it's eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting it till it doesn't move anymore, then slit its throat. If it gets to Dad, it's my job to shoot it or to stab it to get it off him. So he walks up and I'm right behind him, just a tad to his side, so I can see what it is. I wish to this day I hadn't. Like their plan. Shoot the animal, then shoot it some more, then shoot it some more. That's fun. I do like having a creepypasta where they encounter something spoopy and then they have guns to shoot at it. I do like that. It's something kind of unique here. It was leaning over a carcass, tears off its flesh, and throws what it doesn't nibble at aside. What? Okay, it was leaning over a carcass, tearing off its flesh of the carcass, I assume, should be more specific. I'm kind of getting the impression that the rake is tearing off its own flesh and then eating it. Yeah, that's just weird. There's blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It's pale white, human-looking, but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over. Its hands weren't normal. It had long fingers with claws at the end. Okay, I like that. Yeah, that's a good description of what the rake is. So we see that. My dad hesitates. He wasn't about to fire on a person, so he clears his throat to try to get it to turn around. I swear to God, all that noise just ceased. I ain't never heard true silence before that, not after it. But for 2 seconds, nothing, italicized nothing, made any noise, which made it all the louder when it turned around, made the shrill cry, and jumped on Dad. He got a shot off. I think he missed. If he hit the thing, it didn't mind, but it was on him. Tears part of him off. It wouldn't be a creepypasta without a tense swap. It was on him, and it tore part of him off. I guess that would be the proper way. I start shooting it with a .22, point blank, but it barely bled the thing. I got off 5 rounds, and then I started hitting it with the gun butt, but it wasn't budging. Okay, that is kind of scary to have the thing load a bunch of bullets into it and have it just turn away. I do think that's kind of interesting, but I don't know. Sometimes it always bugs me when you come up to the bad guy or like the monster and you just shoot it in the face and it's like, haha, no, I actually am resistant to bullets. I don't know. It just always kind of didn't sit well with me. I don't know. That's just a personal problem. Nothing inherently wrong with this part. It didn't even register that I was there. It clawed at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh. It started on his torso, ripping off the skin. His tit? Then it moved up. That's a really weird thing to say. His chest, maybe? His breast? It would even be, like, less doofy, but to say that the creature ripped off his tit? That's just silly. It tore off his throat. I don't think you'd say tore off his throat. It'd probably be better to say he's tore out his throat. It tore off his nose, his eyes. It scalped him. Then it started digging in and ripped off the bottom half of his jaw. The little bones and that tube in your neck. That tube! Then it tore out his ribs. I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow my dad's knife ends up in this things, and it says things, not with an apostrophe, but things, plural, so now the rake has cloned itself. Oh God, it's undergone mitosis. Shoulder, and my dad ends up on my back. I'm running, and by God, I'm running faster than I'd ever run before or after, and it's following me. I end up back in the woods, opposite the ones we've been in, yo. Word on the street, homie. I'm heading towards my landlord's house, 'cause it's half a mile away. I can hear this thing, screeching and moaning. I hear the tree branches crack and get thrown around. It sounds like someone's taking an axe to every single tree I pass. It's cracking so loud and often, but I just ain't looking back. Finally, I trip into gravel. I look up and there's my landlord. I look up and there's my landlord and a bunch of his buddies. They were grapes, apparently. There was a bunch of buddies. They're all just, like, stuck together at the stem, drinking around a campfire. I scream and cry, and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance, and he looks at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "What is that on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore. It was what was left of my dad. Most of his head, his torso, but nothing after the waist. Okay, so his dad is completely dead, and he's got the flannel shirt left. And I love the fact that he somehow, this 13-year-old kid, manages to outrun the bullet-resistant, deer-shredding rake. Like, within the story, we establish that the rake can kill deer. He rips his father to shreds, is resistant to bullets, but he can't catch a little boy. Kind of pathetic, honestly. Suddenly, we hear it. Screeching. He grabs me. My dad gets thrown on the ground. I think at that point that's not your dad. That's a head and a shirt. I'm fighting him, crying. You're fighting your dead dad? Because I think we can still save him. Then why are you fighting your dead dad? Somehow. But my dad had been gone before I ever picked him up. Yes. Okay, no. He did acknowledge that he clearly can't save the dad. So that's not a stupid sentence there. He has to pick me up and throw me inside before I come with him. So far, I think the two biggest problems grammatically with this story have been, just a few typos here and there, which aren't that bad. The two big issues are, the writer is not great with his pronouns are just all over the place. He'll say he, and then he'll name a person his dad, but the he's referring to isn't his dad. And he did that again with the rake earlier, so that's kind of confusing to listen to. Then the other big issue is all the italicization. It's just really, really confusing. It doesn't really add much to the story that he italicizes these things. If anything, it kind of draws you out a little bit. He and his buddies, he referring to the landlord, which is something that I have to clear up because it's kind of hard to tell within the writing. We're all inside. He and his buddies were all inside, and they're locking doors and getting guns. The landlord's asking me, what happened? What happened? But I just don't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand that there was something dangerous out there. All the lights in the house are on, and someone calls the cops. They'll be there, but in 15 minutes. Oh, it's not the creepypasta cops who come immediately as crime is even thought about. We look outside and see it walk in front of the fire they'd made. Don't know what it is. One of them says it looks like an ape, but the ape is capitalized. So it's actually the guy's his family and his mother-in-law side of the family, the Ape family. Yes, his mother-in-law is Margaret Ape. They don't like to bring up the fact that they don't really walk like humans. The ape family, they have a very distinctive walking. You can really tell someone's an ape just by the way they walk. Margaret Ape, it really was along like a bit of a family like genetic medical issue, so that you don't really bring it up, and so it's kind of rude that they talk about the fact that this creature looks like it's walking like an ape. Suddenly, something goes through the window. We shoot at it, but it ain't the thing. It's my landlord's dog. Just the body, though. Not his head or legs. Oh, they have the dog's body and his dad's head. They can sew their dad's head back onto the dog. Problem solved. We start pushing things in front of doors and windows. I like they're pushing things in front of doors and windows. Like, here's a pillow. Here's a spoon in front of the window. Oh, the creature got in. It couldn't. This mighty spoon couldn't hold it out. It's clearly like super powerful. When we hear something, the garage. They heard the garage. The garage was like, oh, guys, there's a creature in me. Come get it. Yes, it's tearing apart my insides. I'm like your dad, son. I'm gonna die. The creature's got me. It's ripped apart the truck. Oh, now it's ripping apart like me. Something people keep in the garage. We hear metal and glass just get ripped apart. We put a couch and a TV in front of the door to the garage. It banged around some more, but then it got quiet. That sounds rude. Not silent like it was before. We could hear it move around some, and the guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone hands me a pistol. No sooner did I cock the hammer back. The other sentence just awkward. No sooner did I cock the hammer back did we hear something shatter upstairs. Then we heard it screech again, except now it was louder, and it didn't echo and fade out. Because it was inside. No! The screeches are coming from inside the house! We all rushed to the one door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened it just a bit. God, with this terrible, terrible use of pronouns, it opened it just a bit. I assume the creature opened the door just a bit, but since you used two its in one sentence, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. Into what? The door? The creature? It? Pennywise from Stephen King's It? I'm sure there's another it that I could reference, but I'm kind of drawing a blank here. It got its hand through. What got its hand through? The door? The creature? I assume it's the creature since the door doesn't have a hand, but maybe this is a weird door with a hand. I don't know what's going on with these pronouns. Someone with a shotgun took care of that. Put the barrel right up to its wrist and pulled the trigger. Cut its hand off, clean. I don't think if you shoot someone with a gun and their hand comes off, that's not exactly cutting their hand off. I think that's blowing their hand off. That only pissed it off more, though. It started pushing on that door, clawing with its one hand. Ha, what a loser. He only has one claw now. We were on one side, pushing as best we could, and it was on the other, doing the same. That wood just wasn't going to hold, so someone tells us to keep our heads down. Suddenly, the top half of the door is just gone. My ears are ringing. There are splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them just unloaded on top of that door. I don't really know where it went after that. The door, the creature, again, I still don't know what it really means. The police got there. I was still glued to that door, what was left of it. The sun was up before they got me off it. Okay, so it's the door now. They put me in a hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back. Not for a long, long time. When I got back home, I got a job from the landlord, working on the farm. We didn't talk much. Apparently you don't talk. You said a lot of people talk to you. The cashier talked to you. President Obama came out and talked to you. He's like, son, I heard you were attacked by a creature. Apparently my President Obama's from the deep south. Son, I heard you were attacked by a creature. And the son just says, And that's how it goes. He probably doesn't talk to the landlord because he's catatonic, as we established, that he doesn't talk to people. Even when they talk to him, he's kind of rude in that way. When I got back home, I got a job from the landlord. But I signed up for the army when I was 19, and he sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him right away what the police told him. The story that they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf, or maybe a bear that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looks at me stunned. He told me that the hand never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car wrecked, drove it into a tree, died on impact. The hand was never found, probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear that, italicized, looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic. The cops never found him. They said he owed some people some money, and he just ran away. But I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't even if I had the whole goddamn U.S. Army at my back. But that was a lie. What was the lie? That he wouldn't go back into the woods? When my mother died, I don't think my father felt he had... Oh, okay, so, yeah, sorry. I didn't notice that we just left the father's story back into the son's story. The father said that he wouldn't go back into the woods, even if he had the whole army at his back. And the son is saying, but that was a lie. When my mother died, I don't think my father felt he had anything left, and that he might as well settle old scores. He went to those woods. He never came back. The FBI was called. They did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk. Okay, I'm getting confused. I had to get one drunk, and I thought he went out and, he went to the town drunk. It's an old west town they're living in. He goes to the town drunk. He's like, town drunk. No one really pays attention when they're around you. What can you tell me? Ow, Patchouli, there's gold in them thar hills. No, everyone knows there's gold in them thar hills. What can you tell me about the creature and the FBI operation? I had to get one of the FBI agents drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they get a few calls about those woods every year, about someone up and vanishing. But that was all he wanted to tell me. Before he got up and left with the rest of his team, he wrote "The Rake" onto a napkin. I didn't know what it meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would have rather not known. And written by Max Minton. Okay, so it's not the worst creepypasta ever. I'd say it's not amazing. It's memorable, certainly. It's just, there's so much stuff about it it has a beginning, a middle, and I guess an end. So generally the gist of the story goes that the father goes into the woods, the father's father gets killed, comes back, then the creature shoots up a house, breaks into the house, might have killed some people, I don't really know, that was kind of hard to tell. And then that's the rest of the story. The FBI covers it up. And so we get a story that honestly, I don't think it's that creepy. I don't think it builds atmosphere. It's really just a story about her. Look, here's the rake, guys. It's a pretty well written story that goes here's the rake. But overall, I think the plot is what's lacking here. And that's a really sad thing, because I think there's some really interesting implications here that we can talk about, that I really want to talk about with this story. So the first thing to really talk about is the fact that the rake just lives in this forest, I think, that's just goofy, I think. Is that, the whole scariness about the rake is that he's going to show up in your house, he can break in. But the fact that, the rake confines himself within the content of the story to this one forest, it's to avoid getting attacked by the rake, all you have to do is not go into this forest in Ohio. Oh, good, I wasn't even planning on visiting Ohio. I should be safe. So yeah, that's kind of goofy. And then the other thing about the story that kind of destroys the immersion is the fact the story is called The Skinwalker. The father calls the creature the Skinwalker. Then the content of the story always seems to refer to the creature, the rake, is it. Which is, of course, the whole other can of issues, the whole other can of worms there. But the fact that he keeps calling the creature, he never at one point in the story really refers to the creature as the Skinwalker, and there's no reason he should refer to the creature as the Skinwalker, because Skinwalker legend is that they're I believe not witch doctors, but they're magical beings with a Navajo legend that can transform into a variety of different animals. They're usually evil, but the fact that the creature doesn't at any point in the story transform into anything, or give the impression that he's transforming at all. Maybe it's just called Skinwalker because the creature looks human, is actually an animal, which I guess I can kind of see that, but there's so many better things you could call the creature. Like, it would have made just as much sense to call this creature Bigfoot. Honestly, they could have replaced this creature with Bigfoot for all we know. That's the other thing, is that this thing being the rake, within the context of this story itself, doesn't alter the story at all. This could have, like I said, just very well been Bigfoot, and the story would have maintained the same. They even talk about how this creature kind of walks like an ape. It sits like an ape. It's just Bigfoot, but it's the rake this time. And then there's the fact that they shoot off the rake's hand at the end, and did it grow back, is what I'm wondering. And so that also raises some implications there. Is the rake walking around now with only one hand, and within any future stories, should we encounter a one-handed rake, and is that now part of the rake canon? Or does that mean that there are more than one rakes? Which, I don't know, that kind of takes away some of its mysticism that it's one creature. But I do like the questions that raises. I do think the hand getting shot off is kind of decent. And maybe I can compare this to Beowulf. Maybe we can say that this is kind of like a cool modern Beowulf. The creature's hand gets blown off. Oh, it's just like Grendel. And maybe the creature is somehow related to Grendel. That'd be an interesting thing to explore in more stories related to the rake. And then the other thing about this story that I do think is probably the strongest part of the story, that doesn't get explored at all, is the fact that there seems to be a whole government cover-up related to the rake. The hand goes missing. We get the impression that maybe the creature derailed the car, but we also get the impression from reading anything about conspiracies, maybe the car itself was derailed by the cops themselves and they don't want to do anything with the hand. And the FBI say they didn't want to look into the woods, that they just kind of turn a blind eye whenever someone goes missing there. They even talk about the fact that they named the creature the rake, which seems to be a consensus mainstream name, that the creature, within the original story about the rake, I think that was the name the creature ascribed to itself. It talked in that story, and they don't bring that up here, which is kind of a shame as well. The creature ascribes itself the name of the rake, which means the FBI must have at some point communicated with the creature. So that raises a really interesting question. Is the FBI covering up the creature? Is there a whole government conspiracy about those woods? Does that bring questions about what the rake is? Is it an alien? Is it a natural creature? Is it a government experiment? Is it remnants of a previous civilization? I mean, there's so many questions here about the government orchestrating a cover-up about the existence of the rake. That's the real interesting story going on here. And there should be something that focuses more on this. But instead we get a story about, I was walking through the woods, then my dad was killed. It was violent. Oh my gosh, it was super violent. So, overall, my final review of the story, if I had to give it a score of 1 out of 10, I'd give this a 6, I'd say. It was well written, as in terms of grammatically, it was very well written. Of course, aside from the problems that I mentioned, the occasional tense swap, the really odd use of pronouns and the italicizations were the big issues. The plot isn't that exciting. The implications of the government cover-up, the rake's nature, and just the fact that it wasn't a terrible plot. I don't have any problems with it, but it's a memorable story. I think it's going to stick with me. I think that kind of saves it. But I do have to take points off for the whole thing about the Skinwalker. I really don't understand why they had to call it the Skinwalker. They could have called it anything else, and I think it's clearly just an attempt to get this onto a bandwagon. So that is my 10 cents for this story. I hope you enjoyed watching this. Like, comment, subscribe, talk about how much you hate me, talk about how much you hated my show, talk about how you're never going to watch this again, then do that with all the succeeding episodes. Watch them and talk about how terrible they are, please. And, good night, and don't let the spooky rake get you guys. He's also a Skinwalker, you know.